The life of a queen is never easy, but in medieval times, things got really difficult. Just ask Queen Isabella of France, who was married off at age 14 to her cousin, the future Edward II of England, or Queen Margaret of Denmark, who at age 16 was married to King Eric VI of Denmark. You see, royal marriages were less about love and more about uniting kingdoms. And once you were wed, your life got pretty regimented. Take Isabella for instance. After she married Edward, she was paraded around in public to show off her beauty. Basically, she was nothing more than a prize to be shown off. And when she did bear Edward children, her duty was done and she was kicked to the curb. Literally. Both Isabella and Margaret hated their husbands and longed for someone to love them for who they were, not what they represented. They both found that someone in the most forbidden way possible, by falling in love with their royal guards. It was a love that could never be, but their feelings were real nonetheless. And so today, let's look back at the forbidden romances of these two French queens. First, let's meet our two protagonists. Margaret was born in 1353, just as her father, King Valdemar VI, was losing his mind. See, old mate Valdemar was one of those kings who liked to live large. He wasn't doing anything wrong per se, but he was busy having fun while neglecting his duties. This caused a lot of nobles to feel disenfranchised, and they took up arms against him. Naturally, this meant that Valdemar needed some extra security, which is where our boy Godfried Hoyer came in. Godfried was a young knight from a noble family who chose to enter the royal guard because he wanted to serve his country, not rule it. This meant that while other knights were vying for their king's favor, Godfrey was simply doing his job. As such, when the coup against Valdemar finally happened, Godfrey managed to save the king's life, even though he too was captured. It was a brave move that would later earn him the hand of the king's daughter in marriage, an award commonly given to heroes of the realm. In fact, he was offered the hand of any noble lady in the kingdom. All he had to do was name the woman he wanted and her father would be forced to accept. But Godfried's eyes were already set on Margaret. He loved the princess since childhood, and he knew that she loved him back. Unfortunately for the two lovebirds, their fathers had other plans. The royal wedding was meant to cement ties with a powerful family, and Margaret and Godfrey weren't allowed to get in the way. So despite the pair's best efforts, they were married off to other people. But if you think that's the end of the story, oh honey, you haven't met Queen Margaret. We don't know much about Margaret's early years, but we do know that she was married off to King Eric VI of Denmark when she was only 16. That's right. Margaret's dad basically sold her off to form an alliance with the Danish king, but Margaret was not having it. From the moment she arrived at the Danish court, she made it clear that she had no intention of sleeping with Eric. She basically said, "No thanks, I'm not interested," and stuck to her guns. Well, except for one small slip. When Eric traveled to Sweden for a royal visit, he pressured Margaret into sleeping with him. When he returned, she gave birth to a baby boy, but that didn't improve her situation at all. If anything, Eric became even more hostile towards her and accused her of intentionally getting pregnant to trap him. Honestly, the dude was a bit of a control freak, and he wasn't taking any chances. He removed Margaret from court, forbidding her from seeing anyone, including her own son. Margaret's ladies-in-waiting were also removed and replaced with women loyal to Eric, which is how the new queen got wind of Margaret's secret admirer, Godfried Hoyer. Apparently, Margaret had been corresponding with the knight through secret letters, but now that Eric had taken over her correspondence, the notes had stopped. When Eric's men discovered the previous letters, they decided to use them as bait. They wrote a note from Margaret asking Godfrey to meet her in a private garden. Then they hid in the bushes and waited. And when Godfrey arrived, they jumped out, brandishing weapons, and arrested him. Godfrey was brought before Eric, who was absolutely furious. He tortured Godfrey, trying to find out just how deep the relationship between him and Margaret went, but the knight remained silent. He was thrown into prison where he awaited his punishment, but he didn't get executed. That's right. Eric didn't want to look like a petty tyrant, so he exiled Godfrey instead. And then something incredible happened. Margaret, who had been locked in her room for months, seemingly lost her mind. She threw herself against the bars of her window, screaming for Godfrey. When her ladies-in-waiting tried to calm her down, they were punished as well. Obviously, this put a lot of pressure on Eric. Margaret was clearly unwell, and the entire court was afraid of what she might do next. So the king sent for Godfrey and told him that if he would sleep with Margaret and give her a child, he would make him her consort. It wasn't exactly what Godfrey had in mind, but he agreed. That night, Eric and Godfrey slept together, and Margaret conceived. 2 years later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and Godfrey was made consort in accordance with their deal. But it was a hollow victory. Eric was still suspicious of Godfrey, and he continued to keep tabs on the couple. He even spied on them to make sure that Godfrey wasn't secretly poisoning Margaret. Plus, Margaret's mental health took a turn for the worse. Now that she had a child, Eric used her even more, parading her around and forcing her to participate in royal functions. Clearly, being queen wasn't all it was cracked up to be. If you think that's dark, buckle up, Buttercup, because things are about to take a turn for the worse. Margaret died in 1390 after giving birth to her second child, leaving Eric to raise their 2 kids solo. But the king had other plans. He wanted another heir, preferably a son, so he married one of his mistresses and legitimized his children with her. Once again, this didn't sit well with Margaret's brother, who launched a coup against Eric. In the ensuing battle, Eric was captured and forced to abdicate the throne. While he was technically allowed to keep his life, his younger son and his new wife were executed. Eric spent his final days in a monastery, which begs the question, did he ever forgive Margaret? Maybe he did. After all, he named her his successor, ensuring that at least one of their children would get to rule. Now let's turn our attention to Isabella of France and her lover, Olivier de Clisson. Unlike Margaret, Isabella had a rough childhood. Not only was she betrothed to her cousin, the future Edward II, when she was 14, but she had to watch her mother die a horrible death. You see, Isabella's mother, Queen Marie, had an affair with her husband's counselor, Piers de Launay, and when Edward caught wind of the situation, he ordered Launay to be burned alive for his crimes. Talk about a gruesome fate. Little Isabella saw the whole thing and she blamed her father for her mother's death. As such, she hated the idea of marrying Edward II, but at the time, she was only a child and her father was the King of France, so there was nothing she could do. When she arrived at the English court, she realized that Edward wasn't exactly thrilled to be marrying her either. In fact, he made it clear that he considered the marriage a political necessity and nothing more. Eventually, Isabella and Edward did consummate the marriage, but the king never slept with her again, choosing instead to spend his time with his counselors and advisors. To make matters worse, Isabella suffered 2 miscarriages in quick succession, which Edward blamed her for, and that's when she met Oliver de Clisson. The two met in the most cliché way possible, bumping into each other in a moonlit garden. They started off as friends, but soon their friendship developed into something more. They began sneaking around, meeting in secret, and sharing intimate moments. But they couldn't keep their relationship a secret forever, and when Edward found out, he flew into a rage. Oliver was arrested and tortured, but he never confessed to sleeping with the queen. Even if he had, Edward wouldn't have heard it. See, after torturing Oliver, the king had him thrown into the Tower of London where he died. He never got a proper trial, and he certainly never got a proper burial. As for Isabella, she was imprisoned in a series of castles, starting with Windsor Castle. The king had hoped that she would give birth to his heir while in captivity, but that didn't happen. After 5 months, she was moved to a remote castle called Berkhamsted where she spent the next 17 years. She was only allowed to have one servant, who was tasked with keeping her alive, but never improving her living conditions. Isabella slowly lost her mind in the castle, refusing to eat or speak for long periods of time. Finally, in 1326, the weary queen died. While there is some debate as to whether Isabella was murdered or simply died of natural causes, it doesn't really matter. The damage was done. The people loved Isabella, and they blamed Edward for her horrific death. He was eventually overthrown in a coup led by his own mother, Isabella of France. What a tangled web we weave.